Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another Legally Armed America video. I'm, of course, Paul Glasgow here, the one and only truth pimp, dealing you that vulgar display of logic and reason that you have come to expect on a daily basis. Guys, I have a very special guest with me today, Miss Rachel Moss. She is legal counsel for attorneys on retainer. You guys know these are my friends over in Phoenix who look out for the Second Amendment and those of us who carry firearms on a daily basis. Whenever we have to use them, employ them, or whatever to defend ourselves, that's the number that I hope to never have to call, but that's the number to call if you are an AOR member. We're going to talk about Mr. Aaron Spencer. This is the father who shot the child molester, rapist that had taken his 15-year-old daughter on a joyride, and the dad had to chase them down and ultimately ended up taking the child molester's life. We're going to talk about that today from a legal standpoint. Hey there, Rachel. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi, Paul. I'm so excited to be here.
So what I'm going to do, Rachel, is I'm going to lay out some bullet points, pretty much a chronological order of the events that took place. You and I both have talked a little bit about this particular instance. So for those who are not aware of the case, let me just go through some really quick bullet points to kind of set the stage, and then we'll talk about how an attorney would approach this particular instance. For those who are not aware, this was an instance that took place in the state of Arkansas. July 4th, a man named Fossler, age 67, is arrested in an unspecified jurisdiction on charges including, quote, internet stalking of a child and sexual assault of the minor daughter. I believe the daughter in this case was 15 years of age at the time. Fossler is released after he was picked up on these charges, despite these serious charges. A, quote, no contact or protective order is reported by the family, barring him from contacting the daughter. I kind of chuckle a little bit at that, Rachel, because it's kind of like I double dog dare you now to not go after these minors as a 67-year-old man. I mean, at what point do we acknowledge that what he was doing was breaking the law the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time? I mean, now we have to pinky swear, get him to pinky swear that he's not going to do this again. So the ridiculous nature of this whole thing doesn't escape me. Sometime pre-October, again, this was last year, 2024, according to the daughter's mother, Fossler allegedly reinitiated contact, again, against court orders, contact with the daughter despite these orders. The family expresses concern that the system was failing to protect her. The morning of or early October 8th, 2024, Spencer, the father, discovers his daughter is missing from their home in Lonoke County, Arkansas. He reports her missing, and this is important, at least to me. He does report to the authorities that she's missing, and he goes to look for her. Now, other information has come out, not official, but stating that there was some form of a GPS type tracking device. Maybe it was on her phone. Maybe it was an Apple iTag. I don't know what the detail of that is, but that was allegedly how he managed to locate them so quickly together, was he was able to track her. So I wanted to make sure that we point that out. He wasn't just driving around town. He was able to go straight to her, but he contacted law enforcement. Spencer locates the father, locates the daughter seated in a vehicle driven by Fossler. A confrontation occurs. Spencer forces the vehicle off the highway, assuming they were driving. An altercation ensues, and Spencer shoots Fossler. Fossler's pronounced dead at the scene. The next day, Spencer is arrested. Again, this is the father on a preliminary homicide charge. Initially, it was reported as first-degree murder, but I believe the actual charge is second-degree murder by the Lonoke County Sheriff's Office. He is released on bail shortly thereafter. So the court case still hasn't taken place, and since then, the father, Mr. Spencer, has announced that he's going to run for sheriff in this area. And I believe his official position, and I've posted on this before, was something about the justice system failed, his family, his daughter, whichever. Rachel, I want to approach this from two different ways. You being an attorney, I just want to approach it from a non-AOR standpoint. If you're an attorney in this case, how do you approach defending Mr. Spencer in this particular situation?
In Arkansas, I think this is an absolutely defensible case. So I'm an Arizona licensed attorney. I can't give legal advice about Arkansas, but I can read the law and I can explain the law. And when I look at Arkansas law, they have a very strong self-defense and defense of others statute. So the important thing in that statute is it allows individuals to defend others when an aggressor is committing a felony or about to commit a felony. And in this case, I think we can see that Fossler was clearly committing a felony. I think Fosler was kidnapping this young lady. She was there confined by him, and her dad was able to then step in and use deadly physical force to prevent that felony from occurring. In order to step in and protect someone against a felony in Arkansas, the felony has to involve either violence or physical force. So that's important. Here, the physical force that we see being used is confinement, because Arkansas has a few different things that can be considered physical force, and confinement is one of them. So here, I think that would be my main argument if I was representing Spencer. I would say he was stepping in and preventing a felony involving physical force from occurring.
So, and it's a great point. I guess there were two things here. One, we have the kidnapping he was in the process of. The girl was with him in the vehicle. That alone is one felony. And then I guess we can assume that based on what he was arrested for before, there was likely going to be another felony with an attack potentially on the girl, right?
Exactly. I think that would be very reasonable for him to assume. Just like any course of self-defense or defense of others, there has to be that reasonableness element to it as well. And I think any person would agree it's reasonable to think that this man, who has a known history of abusing this specific girl, is not taking her for some pure of heart motive. He wasn't taking her to the hospital because she was having a heart attack in the middle of the night. I don't think anyone would believe some crazy story like that. It's clear that this man was taking this girl for a bad motive, most likely to do what he's done in the past.
Right. So even if we didn't have that very strong and I think reasonable suspicion, there was still a felony taking place, right? I mean, didn't they consider this, or isn't it considered a kidnapping that she was actually with him to begin with?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear under Arkansas law that this would be considered a kidnapping. I think there could be some arguments someone might make regarding the consent element.
Right.
Kidnapping in Arkansas has to be without someone's consent. However, depending on the age in Arkansas, minors cannot give consent if they are 14 years old or younger. You cannot give consent to be taken somewhere without your parents' permission by another adult. However, even if she's above that 14-year-old mark, I think there's a point where you can realize that it wouldn't be unreasonable for the dad to think that she had been taken without consent.
Right.
Because if I think most people would agree, if they wake up in the middle of the night, they're not going to assume their daughter went with a 67-year-old man
Sure.
consensually. I think that'd be a big leap in logic for someone to make. So I think it's absolutely reasonable, even if she's above that 14-year-old age mark, that you could still say that this was not consensual. So I think here he absolutely was defending her from at least a kidnapping. I think we could go further to say he was defending her from a sexual molestation, something like that. But I think the kidnapping would be very easy to convince a jury to see that that was occurring.
Okay. And just for the record, I am on record saying I support what the dad did. I feel like, the way it went down, I think he had, as a father myself, I certainly understand the emotion, but I think the emotion is that sometimes people get in trouble with emotion. Now, I want you to put your attorneys on retainer hat on real quick. Let's approach this from a paying member of attorneys on retainer. By the way, he's not a member of attorneys on retainer, I assume, right? I mean, not that you are aware,
No,
right? Okay.
no, he's not.
So, but let's assume he is. So let's assume he is a member in good standing with AOR, and everything else takes place exactly how it had taken place, except after he shoots Fosler, he picks the phone up and calls AOR. How does this case work with AOR? Because the one thing I want to point out, and again, I'm not saying the father did right or wrong. That's not what I'm saying here. Again, I support what he did. What I do want to point out is I want to make very clear that an AOR membership is not a superpower or a get out of jail free card for everything. There still is a certain level of responsibility for us, the person carrying the firearm and utilizing the firearm. So again, I'm not trying to change the way you think, but I want you to understand that from that standpoint, how would you approach this if you received that phone call from Mr. Spencer regarding this particular case?
Right. So if we received that call from Mr. Spencer in the heat of the incident, often when that happens, right up front. We don't always have all the information we need to determine coverage. So when we're in that situation where we don't know exactly what happened, we treat our members like they're covered. We always want to err on the side of coverage.
Mhm.
So if we do not have enough information to know if it's a self-defense or defense of other situation, we will move forward with coverage until we have something that shows us otherwise.
Okay.
So this would be, I think, one of those gray area situations where just from the initial incident, if he's calling us saying, hey, I had to defend myself, I had to fire a shot in self-defense, we would probably start with coverage. And then we would continue reviewing it as we got more information.
Okay.
However, it's really important when our members tell us they acted in self-defense, we're able to cover them if we believe we can reasonably get that jury instruction at a trial. And I think this is a case where we would be able to at least get that self-defense jury instruction. So it's likely in this case we would be able to cover them and we would be able to assert self-defense. However, I think there's just a few facts that you could change, just very minor facts you could tweak in this case that would make it a completely different story.
Yeah, I think you and I were talking earlier, and you brought up a really good point about Arkansas. What did you say it was defense of a felony? Is that what the defense would be or could be in a case where you're trying to prevent a felony from taking place?
Right. So in Arkansas, they bake that into their self-defense and defense of other statute. In Arizona, we call it crime prevention statute. Arizona makes it really easy. They even list out the exact felonies that you can use deadly physical force to prevent from occurring. Arkansas is a little more squishy with theirs in that they say you can use deadly physical force to prevent a felony that involves violence or physical force from occurring. So my defense of him would actually my recommendation would be to go after that defense rather than just a pure self-defense claim. So if he was an Arizona member, I would say your best bet is actually arguing crime prevention rather than self-defense. Because an important thing people need to keep in mind about self-defense is that you cannot assert it if you were the initial aggressor. Now here, if he was to argue only self-defense, not crime prevention, there would be that issue because he would technically be the initial aggressor from using his car to ram Fosler's car on the road. A car is actually considered a deadly weapon. So he would be the first person to be asserting deadly physical force. So
Interesting.
without that argument of crime prevention for using the deadly physical force to prevent a crime, it's actually not the strongest self-defense claim on its own from that initial action he took. So if he was arguing self-defense for the entire incident, he would kind of lose out
All right.
because he was not facing any deadly physical force before he struck Fosler's car. Now I understand once he struck the car, Fosler allegedly lunged at him. And I think there's an argument that Fosler lunging could be ordinary physical force. Potentially, it could be deadly physical force. Maybe he was reaching for a weapon. Maybe Fosler's particularly strong, able to inflict deadly physical force upon Spencer. So at that point, I think it's much easier to make that self-defense justification. But I think you would at least need that crime prevention justification as well to work hand in hand to have a successful defense in this case.
So in your case, the crime prevention aspect of it is probably more important because you're saying he would likely lose the self-defense one because he was the original initiator in spite of the circumstances that got him there. His phone call to law enforcement, and again, I don't support this, but that should have been where he stopped, correct? I mean, is that according to the law? They're like, all right, you should let us handle this. You shouldn't have pursued, run him off the road, and then of course shot him. It sounds like, and you and I talked about this previously, but the daughter being in the vehicle is how that crime prevention part sticks to potentially protect him in this case. When he originally encountered them, had the girl gotten out of the vehicle and then he pursued, all bets are off on that, correct?
Right. And that would be a situation where we wouldn't be able to assert self-defense or defense of others at that point. And that would be a point where an AOR member would not be able to be covered. If he hunted this guy down, girl gets out of the car, then there's no claim that we could make for self-defense or defense of others. Again, it's a case where I completely understand where the father is coming from. I would want him to get a full and great defense, but it wouldn't be a self-defense case, which is what we do, which is why the point that you made that just because you have an attorneys on retainer membership, it's not a get out of jail free card for every crime. We'll do an excellent defense for self-defense cases and for defense of others cases. But when you go beyond those justifications, then you're just like anyone else in the legal system.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Well, I think in this case, you and I also discussed this briefly. Not assuming that you're defending him anymore. We're just talking now. It sounds like he probably didn't do himself any favors when he came out to run for sheriff by stating that he was, and again, to paraphrase here, that he was, the justice system had failed his family or whatever the use of justice was. He used that word. And I felt like as soon as I heard the word justice, I was like, no, don't use that, because now it looks like he was saying the justice system failed. This guy wasn't going to get justice handed to him, so I handed the justice out to him. Again, fully support what he did. But from a legal standpoint, the use of that word, I just cringed. I was like, no, don't use that. How do you feel about that?
Well, personally, I'm going to say I kind of love that he's running for sheriff. But again, from a practical standpoint for his case, he's made some statements that are really going to hurt him. And I know we probably sound like a broken record over at AOR. We always say, just shut up, just shut up. But while most broken records you want to throw out, this is one you actually want to sit and listen to. When you are in a criminal prosecution, the number one thing you can do to mess up your case is making a bad statement. And here, while his statement sounds good, when you first hear it, it sounds good to say the justice system failed me. I had to get justice on my own. That really makes you question what his motives actually were when he was taking things into his own hands here. When his best defense at trial is something akin to crime prevention, if now he's saying he was going out there to get justice, that's a little different. That almost brings in the fact that maybe he was hunting this guy down. Maybe it wasn't actually self-defense, that he wanted to get justice for his daughter. And while I think that's a very relatable motive to want to get justice for your family member when this man did unspeakable things to his daughter, it's still a problem when it comes to the law. So I think his statements, those are statements that could be absolutely introduced at trial against him. If he's taking the stand and testifying, which I assume he probably will, since he is asserting self-defense, you bet the prosecutor will be cross-examining him about those statements.
Right.
Now, I think there's a way he could have run for sheriff without making such an explicit statement that could come back to bite him. But unfortunately, these statements are already out there for him.
Yeah, I think the implication would be there that his whole reason for running for sheriff was because people saw what happened and what he had to do. I think that the message was already out. I don't think he had to I'm sure his attorney had to have cringed whenever he put that video out. I mean, I can't imagine he had support of his legal counsel to put that little sheriff thing. Only thing I can assume is, wait till the election is over with, but the court date, I think, is it December or next year? I mean, it hasn't come up yet.
Yeah, I think his trial's gonna start in December, but
Okay.
we know these things can get pushed.
Yeah.
If I remember right, I think he was concerned about missing the filing deadline for running for sheriff if he was to wait until his court case was completed. But maybe this round isn't the time to race. Maybe you run for sheriff in a future election if you want to protect your livelihood. Because of course he can't be sheriff if he's convicted of second-degree murder. He can't run for public office once he's been convicted. So he really does need to deal with this court case first. Again, I think he might actually be a great sheriff. I think his video was really well done. I think he makes a lot of good points. I think it's very relatable to many people that we see many instances where the justice system fails people, and it's sad, it's unfortunate, but he's just really put himself in a bad spot for his criminal case that is still ongoing. And that really should be the focus right now.
Yeah, I hope everyone can agree that the world is a better place without Fossler in it anymore. But again, I don't want to see someone who had to, let's face it, he's dealt with some really tough stuff, with the abuse against his daughter and all that. I don't want to see a dad who has had to deal with this kind of stuff spend time in jail for doing something that we all support based on a couple of silly things that he said. because it
Mhm.
sounds like his actions would be, he would likely get off if he would just shut up. Don't say
Mhm.
anything else. Let the attorneys do their job and get him off and then go do your thing. And I think that a lot of people still, I would support him running for sheriff. I certainly would. Just like you said, I feel like sometimes people, whenever they are on that side of the justice system and they're done wrong, I think now when their heart gets in it, they're going to be a little bit more sensitive to certain issues and not just take that high 30,000-foot level approach to issues. Maybe he's going to appeal to people a little bit more by having gone through something like this. So anyway, I just want to make sure that a dad like this doesn't lose his chance to be a free man, to go on, do his thing and continue, hopefully becoming either a good sheriff or maybe a pillar of the community. Maybe he runs for mayor or something else
Mhm.
in the community. So, I mean, I'd love to see that. And I'd love to see him do that as a free man from this side of the bars.
Yeah, me as well. And just like you said, the key at this point is he does need to just shut up, not make any further statements while he's awaiting trial. At trial, he's going to have an opportunity to tell his story, but at that point, he'll have prepped with his lawyer. His lawyer will be able to get him ready for cross-examination, for direct examination, and they'll have thought through their statement, and he'll know what to say, what not to say. And you really just shouldn't be making statements until you speak with a lawyer. So hopefully these statements don't ruin his case too much. I think his lawyer, I assume he has a competent lawyer that's going to be able to handle those statements and prep him for those statements on cross-examination. I think there's a way that he's going to be able to explain taking justice into his own hands on the stand. I don't think it's something that's necessarily going to kill his case. I just think at this point, it's why would you do absolutely anything that could potentially hurt your case when the
Right.
stakes are really high in a case like this? He's
Right.
facing years and years and years in prison if he's convicted.
Right. Well, Rachel, I appreciate your view on this. I mean, it's always good to be able to bounce things off of you guys. I know you do such a good job in the Second Amendment community. And anytime something like this happens, usually you look at it, a person like me can look at it with an objective eye. And in this case, I really can't, because I side with the dad. I side with Spencer and what he did. And I wanted to get your take on this and how you felt about this. And it sounds like, again, barring any other outbursts or any silly things that he says, it sounds like he may be in a good position, again, to your point, if he has competent legal counsel.
Exactly. I think the concern is you never know who your jury's going to be. And I could see a prosecutor putting on a good case here to show that maybe there weren't great motives here. Maybe he just wanted to hunt this guy down and this was the opportunity, this was the excuse to do so. So I could see a prosecutor making a good case, but really, when I look at Arkansas law, I see that he was justified on multiple points for defense of others, for crime prevention. I think there is the self-defense element that comes into play once the guy lunges at him, if you use some combination of those defenses. So I think he has a good shot at trial, but you never know. I think in a case like this, he did the right thing by calling the police at the beginning. I think you were spot on when you mentioned that. Probably best practice is to try to let the police handle a situation like this. They're the people that are best equipped to step in when something like this happens, and they also then you're less likely to be risking criminal charges. But at the same time, in a situation where your daughter's being kidnapped, I can't say I blame the guy for wanting to rely on police response times.
Right.
So it's a really tricky situation. Again, best practice is to get the police involved, but there are times like this where maybe the situation's just too time sensitive to rely on it.
I agree. And I think that it also brings up another key point that because me being an AOR member in good standing, we also have to be somewhat aware of our state laws also, because to your point about Arkansas, seems like it's a lot more, I don't want to call it a slam dunk, but a lot easier case than it might be in another state that doesn't have these same kind of laws spelled out so specifically to cover something like this. I would be really surprised if other states that are not very Second Amendment friendly have these types of laws written into their system like this is. So I think that we also that's the point I want to make in this video. Don't assume that your laws are parallel to Arkansas's laws. Yours may be significantly different. And I think that as gun owners, we have to be aware that state to state is going to make a big difference.
That's a great point. I tell people that nowadays it's never been easier to look up what your state's laws are.
Yeah.
Really, even me as a lawyer, when I want to look up a law that I don't know, I just type in Arizona statute, fill in the blank. And it's just that easy to type it in straight into Google, pull up the laws. I always recommend people look in their state specifically at the self-defense laws, defense of others, or third-party defense laws, and crime prevention laws. Looking at those laws will give you a really good overview of when and when not you can use your firearm in your state.
Excellent advice. Rachel, I appreciate it. Looking forward to having you back on here. Always good advice, and keep doing what you guys are doing. You guys are doing a remarkable job over there at AOR. I'm definitely a proud member and enjoy seeing what you guys are doing over there.
Well, I appreciate that, and we love Legally Armed America as well.
Well, thank you, Rachel.
Always good to get the perspective of an attorney in cases like this, and Rachel brought up so many good points. Definitely take the advice of being aware of your state and being a responsible gun owner. Again, for the record, in case it wasn't clear, I support what Mr. Spencer did. I just don't want to see anybody get hemmed up, even though they were doing the right thing from a legal standpoint. Be safe out there, guys.
Don't forget, guys, if you're looking for a book to educate yourself and to educate the idiots out there who can't think for themselves regarding mass shootings, go to damnliars.net. Again, damnliars.net, and get my brand new book, Damn Liars.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
It's hanging around.